Hey, thank you. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Raleigh City Council. We're going to start with a joint hearing with the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. Do we have Tanya Tully here?
Tanya's muted.
Okay.
Hello, thank you, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Tanya Tully with Planning and Development. The city has received 2 applications for landmark designation, and I'll make a very brief presentation. But before I do want to recognize the RHDC members present online with you today, especially the chair, Nick Fountain. The RHDC has reviewed the reports and found that the properties meet the criteria for designation. The reports were referred by City Council to the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources as required by statute. After closing the public hearing, the request is for you to refer the matter back to RHDC to consider the recommendations of the state of North Carolina and any additional information received during the public hearing. The first is Hillcrest Cemetery at 1905 Garner Road. It was constructed, the first burial was in approximately 1920 and it was founded in 1926. It is a planned 20th century cemetery that served Raleigh's African American community during the racially segregated Jim Crow era through the present. It is historically significant as the city's only known private cemetery that was developed and managed by African American entrepreneurs. Specifically, it was associated with the Lightner family and Calvin Lightner, one of Raleigh's most prominent business and community leaders of the early 20th century. Hillcrest Cemetery was formally established in 1926 by brothers C.E. and R.H. Lightner, although grave inscriptions indicate that the land had been in use as burial places since at least 1920. The cemetery was established as a related venture to their Lightner funeral home, which the family had operated since 1911. Hillcrest Cemetery was established as a place for elaborate yet affordable burials for Raleigh's Black middle class. It retains a high degree of location, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and historical association with Raleigh's African American community. The next property is the McAdams House at 2214 Wheeler Road. It was constructed in 1954. The McAdams House is significant as an excellent example of architect Leif Vallen's custom-designed single-family homes in Raleigh. Vallen moved to Raleigh in his 30s and practiced architecture here until the 1970s. Vallen was not associated with the School of Design at NC State. His architecture was less academic and more pragmatic. He primarily used an earthy Wrightian approach of low-slung buildings with heavy horizontal emphasis and a generous dose of stone accents. In addition to multifamily and speculative subdivision housing, Vallen designed a number of single-family, client-specific houses such as this one. The McAdams House was designed as a side gable house with a projecting cross-gabled rear L and a projecting front-gabled carport wing. The carport was enclosed in 2009. With this exception, the exterior changes are on secondary elevations and are not visible from the facade. Vallen's use of orchard stone veneer at the corners of the facade and at the entrance and the inclusion of a stone face integrated planter are hallmarks of his style, as is the horizontal emphasis of the house as a whole. Thank you.
So, Tanya?
I do not believe anyone has signed up to speak. You should have received an email, as did RHDC, from Ruby Powell with the Friends of Hillcrest Cemetery.
So, if no one has signed up to speak,
Mayor, I'll do the same thing you do with the zoning hearing, just open, close on each one of them.
Okay. All right. Well, we will open the hearing for Hillcrest Cemetery. As we know, no one is here to speak on that. Are there any questions from the council members? Okay, I will close the hearing then. I'll open the hearing for McAdams House. We know no one is here to speak. Any questions from the council members? Okay, I will close the hearing. The next step would be we don't need to approve this. This is informational. You will go back after holding the hearing and conduct your vote, correct?
Correct. The request is for you to refer it back to RHDC, who will then look at the comments from the state and from Ms. Powell and come back to you with a formal recommendation and the ordinances for you to adopt.
Do we need a vote to refer this back? City Attorney?
You haven't.
I think it's probably cleaner just to make a vote to refer it back, and so everybody's.
Okay, could we, I see Councilor Stewart has made the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Branch has seconded. All in favor, raise your hands, please. Anyone opposed? Okay, that has been referred back to the Historic District. Thank you so much. Good seeing everybody. Thank you for your service. Okay, as we leave the meeting, I will just remind everybody that our next topic is rules of decorum for public comment. Going to ask everybody who's waiting to speak to, it's been a rough 24 hours for many people. Please approach the council as you would each other with kindness and grace. And we will hear from the first person, Morris Freeman.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the phone too.
Morgan, Morris, just either be on the phone or be on the computer. Let's not do both.
Thank you. Phew, thank you. I didn't know. That was about to drive me crazy. Whew. Okay, good evening, everybody. Good evening to all city council members, staff, and all those in attendance. My name is Morris Freeman Sr. I come before you today to ask for a text change for 6.4.10, section D.2.A, where it states that only 2 food trucks can occupy a half acre of land. My request is to have this changed to 10 to 14 trucks on a half acre of land and up to 10 food trucks with a 0.35 of acreage. I'm requesting this change for the addresses of 1900 Pool Road and 213 Kennedy Street. This change will have a positive impact in our community. In this time of COVID-19, it would be a great benefit to our economy as well as adding benefit to the standard of living for those in our community. This would be a safe place to go out for some air with the family in a safe environment. This would also allow the community to meet each other over food in this time of gentrification. This would be beneficial to our local restaurants and food truck entrepreneurs. With all the restrictions and safety levels fluctuating weekly, it's almost impossible for most of our restaurants to survive. Whereas with this community food truck pavilion, they wouldn't have to search for new locations every day for setup. The public will always know where they're located. I am a lifelong resident in this community. Currently, I reside on Pool Road. I am a positive pillar in this community, and with your assistance, we can revitalize the standard of living for those in this community and surrounding areas. Again, I ask of your assistance in helping me help our community. In advance, I thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Morris Freeman Sr.
Thank you, Morris. Could we ask planning staff to look at this and report back to us at the next?
Yes, Mayor, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. All right, next we have Ann Stoddard.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Mayor and council members, I'm Ann Stoddard. I'm the Director of Development at Grub Ventures, which is at 3700 Glenwood Avenue. And I'm also co-chair of the Development Services Advisory Committee, or DSAC. I want to start by thanking you for passing TC 1419 recently. In my email to each of you, I promised that DSAC would be back quickly following adoption of TC 1419 to propose a related text change. That's why I'm here tonight. In our members' opinions, the concept of change of use is a long-standing problem in the Raleigh Code. TC 1419 created site plans labeled tiers 1 through 3, and we propose a tier 0 site plan. Right now, even if a change of use requires less parking and in other ways does not increase the intensity of a permitted use, it must go through and pay for at least a tier 1 site plan review. We propose that for changes of use that are permitted under the zoning and leave the intensity of the use either unchanged or reduced, that there be a simple process to confirm that tier 0 is appropriate, rendering no further process needed beyond a building permit. Let me give you a quick example of where this would trip up a Grub Ventures project. Over at Raleigh Ironworks, I provided the city with my best estimates of square footage by use in order to calculate parking needs, which is a requirement. For restaurant and bar uses, that number is 24,823 square feet, exactly. All I can tell you about that number right now is that it's my best estimate and that it's going to be wrong. In today's environment, we expect a combination of office, which is a permitted use with lower parking needs, and restaurant space. But under TC 1419, depending on how many square feet we change, I believe that we're at least going to need to do a tier 1 site plan, which will lengthen unnecessarily the time frame to get a tenant in and operating. As the local economy recovers from COVID, there are likely to be many spaces like this which transition away from restaurants and more intensive uses to less intensive ones. Even a tier 1 site plan, which is designed to be short, is sand in the gears of this transition to a different economy. TC 14 made many good changes, and we ask that you initiate a text change to provide for a simple change in use verification, which is very quick, requires little staff time, and allows low-intensity uses to move forward to building permit. Thank you very much on behalf of DSAC, and congratulations on the housing bonds passage, which was a bright light yesterday in a not-so-hot day.
Thank you. Can we have staff come back to us with a report and an update on this issue? I know that change of use has been a major challenge. So,
Sure. Mayor, a question is, do you want those reports to come back to you through the weekly report, or do you want to put these two text change requests on the agenda? What's your preference?
I think both of them a little more complicated than just writing a report. So I would prefer they come back to us as special items.
Okay, will do.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Chuck Valdez.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Well, good evening, everybody. I know it's been a long day. I just wanted to touch base on a few things. I'm the owner of 3610 Bush Street, which is a big component of the St. Albans Bush Street plan, which, as you are aware of, the Planning Commission made a request to grant some revisions. But in any case, beyond that, I'm also a commercial broker, and I've listened to my case as well as that of many others, and we have a serious problem with what's going on with the planning department. What we're continuing to see is conflict of interest. And that's very apparent in the Midtown. It's very apparent in South Raleigh and many other plans. We have people who are on this open committee who also work for the major developers. We have a gentleman on the Planning Commission who has to recuse himself almost every time because he has a relationship to all these problems. And what was most disappointing to me is hearing a councilman this afternoon at 1 o'clock at the 24-minute 40-second starting point, Mr. Patrick Bufflin, who made some very false statements. And Mr. Buffkin has a conflict of interest himself. He owns a property at 3520 Apache Drive with Miss Rachel Rosenberg. It's about 1,000 square feet. It backs right up to Bush Street. And he makes some claims about reaching out to the community. I don't even know who this guy is, nor do any of the property owners. We keep hearing this 60% approval. Every property owner affected that I've spoken to, it's 100% unanimous disapproval of any change of use. And he's an attorney. He has a real conflict of interest here. And why he's allowed to even weigh in on something like this is absurd. I'm a commercial real estate broker, have been for 19 years. I'm licensed in 6 states. I've been appointed by multiple court systems in multiple states as a real estate expert. I speak at CEO forums, and I've had experience in every asset type, every entity class, and I'm beyond disappointed that this is allowed to go on, because when you're representing the community, you're servants of the community. You're supposed to be listening to the community, and I commend the commissioners for listening to the community, and I have yet to hear from Patrick Bluffkin after email. So what he's saying is completely false. He has a conflict of interest, and we really need to get this conflict of interest situation under control. And furthermore, with all these plans that I'm seeing, I've asked Patrick Young, Jason Harden, and many others for DOT reports, environmental impact studies reports.
Valdez, your time is up. Thank you very much. Councilor Buffkin. Councilor Buffkin, you had your hand raised.
Yes, Mayor. In response to the comments we just heard, I'd like to say for the record and for the benefit of the council that I take conflicts of interest seriously, and I'll be consulting with the city attorney about what we've heard tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Calla Wright.
Good evening, everyone, the mayor and the Raleigh City Council. Again, I'm Calla Wright, and I'm here again to speak on the issue as it relates to Raleigh as a southern city, who was once known and a part of the Jim Crow slavery era. Because of the annexation, the city commissioners created segregated districts marked by poverty and crime. Some of the Black neighborhoods that included during the era was Edenton Street, Harrington, Lenore, Person Street, Hillsborough Street, Fayetteville Street, Northwest, Southwest Raleigh, Oberlin Road, Idlewild, Cotton Place, or just to name a few, where Black families lived, and they were employed as domestic workers, common laborers for many white families. We're now in 2020, and many of the Black families have lost their generational wealth. Displaced families who earn low wages, who can no longer afford to live in our great city. Because of the decisions made by our many of the council members. There are white developers, brokers, real estate agents who have taken control of the land through eminent domain, foreclosure, tax liens, and other means to continue. They continue to make enormous financial gains, huge profits off the backs of these Black families who were worked and lived during the Jim Crow slavery era. The city council has placed deplorable, horrendous, smelly, unsightly sewer systems, reused wastewater towers, which houses significant portions of the city's waste dump in our Black neighborhoods, low-lying area. There's flooding of our land, soil erosion, and this form of abuse to our citizens and families continues, and yet we have failed as a city to find remedy and to compensate these families for the suffrage we've had to endure. So I'm asking each of you as our representatives for this great city to find some resolutions and to make sure that Black families are a part of the decision-making process, particularly in this area. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Calla. Next, we have Helen Tart.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Helen Tart. I live at 611 Monroe Drive since 1989. I'm here because of rezoning case C-2020, the property on Gorman Street. When I realized how close the parcel is to a city-owned Greenway, it seemed to me that limiting access to that property to just a few families would be wasting an opportunity. These 17 forested acres could be a gateway to the Greenway in an area that is already heavily developed with housing. This property could be used as a park with cabins that the city could rent out. The rent from the cabins could help pay for the cost of the park. Even if the tract is left as is with just an easement to the Greenway and no other investment by the city, it would be a small tax revenue loss since the tax value is low. The developer only paid $158,000 for the property, probably has another $100,000 or so invested in the plans. If they donated the land, the city could forgive property taxes on one of their other properties in exchange. Maybe the city could even purchase the landscape design work that the developer has already done to keep stormwater on site. Besides the city using the land, there are other uses that would take advantage of the natural state of the property. One of the owners of the apartment complexes nearby might want to use it as an amenity for their residents. North Carolina State University might be interested in the tract as a teaching forest. My point is 35 private homes is not the highest and best use of this property. Maybe you could send it to the Growth and Natural Resources Committee to look at alternatives for this property. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so you're aware, that case was pulled today by the developer. Could somebody from staff just reach out to Ms. Tart and let her know that this case was pulled so she's aware? City manager?
Yes, Mayor. Planning staff will make a connection there.
Okay. Next is Ryan Rangel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thanks. I wanted to thank the mayor and the city council for an opportunity to speak regarding my concerns about how the city of Raleigh builds land use plans now that I've experienced the process firsthand with the St. Albans Midtown plan. It's interesting to me that I've been planning on giving these remarks for almost a month, but yesterday Aaron Sanchez Guerrera of the News and Observer published an article about the Downtown South plans, and it almost directly reflects the comments I was planning on giving today. I want to commend the city of the whole, or the committee of the whole, for asking all the right questions and unanimously voting to leave the land use at the Bush Street corridor the same. But it still brought up a lot of issues for me. First is notice. Something's broken with the notice process in the city planning department. Notices seem to go out late. In my particular case, I ended up opening the notice 2 days after the meeting. Notices seem to be written in a way that makes it sound innocuous, like it's no big deal, you don't need to come here, despite the fact in my case it was going to very adversely affect my property. And also, the city seems to wait until the last minute after decisions are made to inform owners. So in our case, the city decided around March of 2020 to change the land use, but we weren't informed until until the notices for the committee of the whole meeting in August that this plan was in place. So there's really a problem, a major problem with notice. Second of all, as Mr. Valdez pointed out, when we were trying to investigate what was happening, we asked for studies, environmental studies, engineering studies, traffic studies, anything that supported the plan, because there were a lot of aspects of the plan that didn't make sense to us. none were really given except for one report called the Rose Report. And in that case, the Rose Report actually made a lot of recommendations that are completely counter to the St. Albans Midtown Plan. Secondly, the city staff at that point seemed to rely entirely on a survey that was done of 130 people online, mostly online. So it wasn't even clear to me whether those people even were citizens of Raleigh that responded. And so because there's no other study supporting the plan, the only thing they could rely on is the support of the principles of the plan from this survey. Also, if you look at the demographics of the survey, they're shamefully non-representative of Raleigh's demographics. So overall, I have a lot more issues with what happened that I'd be glad to talk to, but those are the two main issues that I saw, and I really ask that the City Council, the Mayor, look into how these plans are put together, because people are starting to take notice. When I saw that article about Downtown South, those comments in that article were directly what I experienced with the St. Albans plan. Thank you.
Mr. Rangel, going forward, when your time is up, please to Tanya Height. I'm sorry if I didn't get your first name right.
Mayor, we do not have her on the line.
Okay. Reverend Taylor.
Good evening. My name is Jamon Taylor, Director of St. Ambrose Episcopal Church in Southeast Raleigh and a member of One Wake. King Realty is asking for two major public investments for their downtown south development, a rezoning and a direct subsidy from taxpayers. We believe that Raleigh citizens should be treated as investors, and our interests and concerns must be addressed by each investment. One Wake and our partners have engaged hundreds of community members on this issue. One major concern that we have identified is stormwater and downstream flooding. Our community floods now. The project is 7/10 of a mile upstream, Walnut Creek, from my church in Rochester Heights, a flood-prone area. Downtown South is 145 acres. I've been encouraged that the city's planning commission has had several additional meetings to address stormwater related to this project. I support the letter from Chris Bass Engineering outlining 10 recommendations for stormwater, as well as Partners for Environmental Justice and their letter. I have concerns about the stormwater report King Realty shared with the Planning Commission. My concern is that McAdams' analysis of King Realty is a simplified study completed with a large-scale watershed model created solely for the purpose of creating floodplain maps without the complexities of the Walnut Creek watershed. The model confirms things we already know. The conclusion drawn does not meet the supporting documentation. Additional study is necessary. I implore and encourage the City Council to work with an outside engineering firm such as Chris Bass Engineering or another firm to do an independent analysis. Also, I ask the City Council to direct the city's stormwater engineers to run two analyses on this project. One analysis with the city's current stormwater design conditions, and the second with the newly proposed stormwater guidelines that the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission is proposing that the council adopt. Our neighborhood floods now. My church is in a floodplain. My church will flood. I do not want St. Ambrose and Rochester Heights to continue to flood. We are Raleigh citizens. Our leaders must address flooding and repairing the floodwaters of mistrust over the levee of history. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
Also, can I make one comment?
Yes.
One request. If I know this is still with planning and we don't touch anything while it's in planning, but just if staff can look at the stormwater reports that multiple bodies have done and be prepared to address that and use the resources they need to properly present. That would be helpful.
Or to be able to respond to questions.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, next we have...
Excuse me, Mayor, sorry. We do have Tatiana now. She had some technical difficulties, but we have her now if you'd like to circle back.
That would be great. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for your time. My name is Tatiana Height, and I am the Program Director of Partners for Environmental Justice located at 813 Darby Street in Raleigh. As you all may now be aware, PEJ has been very vocal throughout the Z1320 rezoning application process in our advocacy for equitable development, low impact development, and green stormwater infrastructure. In addition to our advocacy, it was stated publicly at the Planning Commission that 369 letters were sent to the Commission regarding the rezoning, and that only 2 were in support. Today, I come before you with 2 specific items to consider. Firstly, this afternoon, an MOU was brought before the Council to discuss the potential for a tax increment grant and a potential associated community engagement process. PEJ would like to formally request that if a community advisory group is formed in association with this rezoning and subsequent development, that PEJ, One Wake, Success, and Southeast Raleigh residents be the first point of contact for such a group. Second, Chris Brass Engineering has taken an initial look at the preliminary downstream impact analysis put forth by the developer. In general, the study falls short of addressing our concerns and includes many oversimplifications that are inappropriate for this complex watershed. We believe that the community deserves far more detailed information, which is precisely what we described in our previous request. We have been contacted by the developer to set up a meeting and are looking forward to the chance to interact with them directly and to explore whether and how we can work together cooperatively going forward. But in the meantime, we are advocating for no conclusions to be made about potential impacts as the provided study does not support them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Height, one of the things that you may have noted at the meeting today, we did talk about a community engagement process. We would include members of the community on that with organizations such as PEJ, One Wake, and among others. We're looking at the potential for what we've done in the past few months has actually worked out really well. Application process with nominations from the City Council for people who would serve on that. So we will be in touch, and we appreciate you coming forward.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said thank you. We look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you. Next we have Donna Bailey.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to talk about citizen engagement, and since we're in this no man's land where there's very little citizen engagement going on, other than the CACs that are continuing to meet, and they're having very robust meetings, and we welcome all people to our meetings, and including staff, city staff that continue to educate us about things that are going on in the city. One of the things that we have always used are our CAC, which is where all of the chairs and leadership of the CACs come together to learn about different things the city has to offer. But apparently, and this is where we left off last time when Mayor Baldwin, you booted it to Ruffin Hall, who booted it to the city attorney, that said it's up to council to decide whether city staff can come to the RCAC meeting. This just enhances citizen engagement. I know the city council hasn't really been doing much to support citizen engagement, and I know that you want to further cut citizen engagement by limiting the time citizens get to speak from possibly 3 minutes to 1 minute. This is outrageous when there's very little avenues, but you have an opportunity right now to provide more than just lip service to wanting citizen engagement. So I would like for you to all deal with the subject that I spoke to last time when the city attorney said it's up to city council to decide whether city staff can go to RCAC meetings. So I will give you the remainder of my time so you can all address that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robin, can you update us, please?
I think the question is, it's really a question of policy and how staff resources are allocated. Because the RCAC isn't a city-sponsored, city official group anymore, that I think, and I guess I would defer to Refin on this, that when groups of individuals ask the city to come make presentations, that there's only so much resources to go around, and because this RCAC is not an official group, then I think the council can decide how those resources are allocated. And if you send them to the RCAC, are there going to be other groups like that you're going to have to make that decision on? And basically, that's where it is. They're a group of individual residents that have gotten together, and so it would be up to council to decide who to tell staff to go make presentations to, and I don't think that they meet the definition at this time. Have I said that right, Ruffin?
Yes, thank you, you have.
Okay, Councilor Cox, you had your hand raised.
Yes, well, first of all, I support our city staff being able to meet with our citizen groups, including the RCAC. I believe that city staff goes out and meets with lots of groups, whether it be with the Chamber of Commerce or whatever. And I don't understand why we would single out this group and deny them that access. So I would support being able to allow city staff be able to attend these meetings, to be able to provide some information that citizens would like to have, perhaps from the police department, perhaps from planning, perhaps from stormwater management. I think it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cox. Councilor Melton?
Yeah, and maybe I'm not understanding, but I think the question may be getting framed in not the right way. I don't think anyone is asking us to direct staff to go proactively to a certain group. I think the request is let all community groups be treated the same. And if there's a request to come and staff has the resources available and thinks it would be helpful, they can go. But they're not being told, no, you cannot meet with one specific group. And I think all of our community groups should be treated the same. And so if staff needs direction from council, if there were confusion with any motions that were passed earlier this year, my preference would be to send the message that anyone from the city of Raleigh is welcome to meet with any community neighborhood group if they choose, though no one is being forced to go anywhere. And I think that is the direction that I would like to send.
I think that's what we originally said, is that the staff could continue to meet with community groups upon request based on staff resources. So it seems that if we want to move forward with that, there seems to be some consensus. So, Mr. City Manager, are you okay?
Certainly. We can all understand some of the sensitivity and perhaps confusion that was as a part of these discussions earlier in the year, particularly the set of February motions and what was the council's intent associated with those actions. All I think we're really saying is just needing some clarification. What I'm hearing from the comments from the council members is that if the RCAC invites the staff to come and make presentations, and that we are available and it's within the ability to schedule, that the council is comfortable with us doing that like any other group. That's certainly fine with us, and we'll be happy to do that if that's your intent. But, obviously we try to help any particular group, but we're also being sensitive to perhaps what was the council's direction and intent back in February. So if you're comfortable with that, sort of head nods.
Yes.
We will be happy to work with the RCAC. And then it just is a matter of availability and scheduling, if you will.
Okay.
Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Then we will make that happen.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we have Tim Niles.
Mr. Niles is not on the call, Mayor.
Next, we have Bob Gary.
Hello?
Hello?
You're on.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's good. I want to make 3 points about the Downtown South project. It's a great site for development in South Raleigh. It's on a future transit route. It should have abundant, affordable housing. Let's build a neighborhood that fits with what's around it. Control the flooding. Follow your Southern Gateway plan. Okay. Point number 1, tax increment grants. Once that Pandora's box is opened, it will be impossible to control it. Does every developer get a TIG? Watch out that you don't saddle the taxpayers with the customary costs that developers pay and have always paid. Point number 2, your planning commission is wrestling with Kane's rezoning application. Please listen to them. A project of this size should be a planned development with a lot of detail about what will be built and where. Kane's application, not a single detail. Instead, it asks for a maximum 40 stories across the site, which would allow them to build or sell for maximum profit. That's fine. That's what developers do. But in exchange, they customarily offer some amenities, some community benefits in return for being allowed to build bigger and have more impact on city infrastructure. Kane's plan is a blank sheet, especially where the benefits should be. Well, Kane is certainly audacious. He wants this enormous entitlement first, and then he will talk to the city about any community benefits if the taxpayers are willing to pay for them, and then only if he wants them. He won't pay for them, but he gets to say what they are. To put it mildly, this is altogether backwards. The benefits should be offered and agreed to first before the rezoning is considered and while the city still has some leverage. To do the reverse makes Kane all-powerful and puts the taxpayers in the position of mere supplicants, coming hat in hand to ask, please, sir, can we have some affordable housing in your giant project? And the answer, according to Bonner Gaylord, is that no, you can't have any affordable housing or a library or a community center or anything else you might actually want unless you've already paid me for and paid me to build my stadium for $200 million of our money. Anyway, it's whatever Kane wants at whatever price he exacts, because remember, you've already handed him the rezoning, so you've cut the ground out from under the community entirely. And by the way, point number 3, where is the community in all of this? Community engagement by Kane has been ephemeral at best. I don't have much confidence in council's ability to name a committee.
Mr. Gary, your time is up. Next, we have Carmen Cawthon.
Good evening. I'm going to read briefly from an email that I sent to members of the council and the mayor earlier today. It says, I realize that you might not receive or read this email until after the 1 o'clock meeting of the city council has passed, or even after the 7 o'clock meeting of the council is over, but I felt the need to speak to you regarding information I accessed yesterday. I didn't want to make a comment until I had read and digested the report of the city staff on the memorandum of understanding proposed by Kane Realty Corporation and the plans for the TIG and community engagement process. I am dismayed that there would be no opportunity for public comment on this part of the process, even before the council takes action on how to proceed. And of course, you did take that action in the 1 o'clock meeting. At the last council meeting, Mayor Baldwin told Bonner Gaylord that public comment came right after the consent agenda. Obviously, that did not take place today. I fully understand that an item created and or placed as a special item takes precedence, but for something this new and a project of this size, I believe that citizens of this city should have had time for discussion before the council moved forward. Several things in the report were concerning to me. On page 6, the mention of the TIG establishes the incremental tax value of the project that is different than the assessed value at the start of the project and the end of the project. In today's information, with no site or development plan in the rezoning packet, How will the city know what is involved in terms of tax value? On page 14 of the report, was a process established for community engagement. The city is now having problems with community engagement with the removal of the CACs. The consultant that was hired is not finished with that process of a new form of community engagement. And the community engagement process development public participation playbook has not yet been improved. Citizens of Raleigh deserve better than this, and it's the responsibility of the council to make that happen. The election of the council members is not a patriarchy, and the advocacy of citizens is still needed as much as possible. I sincerely hope that you don't decide to create the confirmation group that was listed in the report, because that seems to be a rubber stamp type of group. On page 17, why is there an assumption that the Planning Commission will report the rezoning process out in time for a December 2020 council vote if the Planning Commission has 90 days for consideration of the largest project the city has ever seen, and they have until January 11th to make that report? And on page 22, under the Memorandum of Understanding, the attraction for economic development and tourism seems to be pointed towards the entertainment.
Ms. Cawthon, your time is up. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the bell ring.
No, and just to be clear, the public comment period occurs tonight. So that's why there was no public comment period.
Seems that you should have it both times if you're meeting both times. Thank you.
Thank you. Hua Huang.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right, thank you. My name is Hua Huang, and I'd like to talk about the term reparation. Now, this is more than just a word. It's a conversation and a commitment centuries overdue. And reparations is a large, multi-angle effort to truly address the impact of racism. You got to deal with police violence, which is related to homelessness, to poverty, joblessness, gentrification, and displacement. With the pandemic still going on, there's going to be an increase in people having to survive unemployment and poverty on top of personal health and safety, especially for the Black communities. And for real reparation effort to take place, you can't address any of them like they're isolated incidents. Speaking of, there's a Downtown South project proposed by King Realty which impacts neighborhoods on a citywide scale. But first, I'm personally concerned that the public hearing and commenting for the proposal was scheduled when most people are still focusing on the nationwide election as we speak. I don't understand why there's such a rush for the Planning Commission to have a report by December 2020. King Realty had just released their study on stormwater last week, and Chris Bates Engineering just commented that the report is essentially inadequate. The public deserves to take the time they need to review and comment, especially when this is a project that organizations like Partners of Environmental Justice has determined would exacerbate chronic downstream flooding to low-income minority communities at Rochester Heights and along Walnut Creek. If the city passes the project with little or no input from impacted residents, the city will invite strong potential for flooding of historically Black neighborhood, and that's the opposite of what reparation efforts should entail. Second, King Realty mentioned on MOU that they have robust citizen engagement. If there's real community engagement, why is it that on October 22nd, 1 week, and St. Ambrose Episcopal Church's canvassing revealed the majority of the surveyed residents at Rochester Heights reported to have little to no knowledge of this development? Since COVID lockdown, there's not been opportunity for engagement for people who don't have web access. If real efforts have to be made, everyone should be considered. So please implement outreach efforts that would reach out to those without web access. And one more note, with this being a major development, I imagine there will be multiple developers who would like to get involved. So would there be a conflict of interest with the contract with Bond Hill? Now, what I haven't seen last along, and what I would like to see proposal from impacted residents and maybe even from people from Rochester Heights on how they want to shape their home. This is a chance for the city to say that they help build something that's truly steered by community. So instead of rushing through when we were just recovering from national election panic, let's allow residents to actually breathe and be able to have a real discussion and voice. So do right by the people in greatest need and put them before all other consideration. Thank you for
Thank you. Next, we have Amanda Bambrick.
Amanda is not attending tonight.
Okay. Bob Fry.
Bob Fry also emailed and said he was not going to attend tonight.
Okay. Terry Snyder.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, city staff. My name is Terry Snyder, and I am a long-term resident of Raleigh. As much as I support an affordable housing bond for the residents of Raleigh, I could not bring myself to vote for it as written. Since the bond is not specific about monetary appropriations, I do not trust the City Council to adequately address the needs of those who need it most. This distrust is based on how much the overall development is being and has been conducted throughout Raleigh. I would like to refer to the Raleigh's comprehensive plan. It makes a clear commitment to sustainability and focuses on the interdependent relationships of environmental stewardship, economic strength, and social integrity. It emphasizes the provision of economic and housing options for all segments of the population in all areas of the city, including aging in place. It strongly promotes protection, restoration, and preservation of the environment and existing neighborhoods, of careful infill development that complements existing character and responds to natural resources, the conservation of urban, suburban, and native forests, preserving natural landscapes, wildlife, and habitat protection, and on and on. This plan is the city's primary policy and planning document and mandates that elected officials must adopt it and fund its implementation, and that appointed officials will use it as a guide to discretionary decisions. It is also an important source of information and guidance to private sector actors involved in development. Was anyone adhering to the policy guidelines of this plan when decisions were made about the development next to Shelley Lake or the one above Azalea Falls? I have observed total disregard of these policy guidelines in many neighborhoods of both lower income and in well-to-do neighborhoods, which is promoting both race and class gentrification. Many developers, large and small, seem to have free rein on what is being built. Smaller, affordable homes and affordable apartment complexes are routinely replaced with huge, expensive homes and luxury apartments in many neighborhoods. How is this addressing the issues of conservation, preservation, protection, affordable housing, and gentrification? Since it is not being done now, I do not trust City Council, developers, and other stakeholders to adhere to the comprehensive plan's policy guidelines any more than it is being done now in the continued development of Raleigh, including the development of the Downtown South project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Michael Lindsay.
Hi, Mayor Baldwin, City Council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. After you came into office in 2019, you did a wonderful thing for Raleigh citizens when you expanded the opportunities to speak before this council, and I wanted to let you know we really do appreciate it. You may not hear it that often. This evening, I want to address the Downtown South rezoning request and taxpayer subsidies. Developer John Kane has a great track record, especially his reinvention of struggling North Hills Mall that he turned into the thriving mixed-use development it is today. Breaks to develop land east of North Hills, claiming he could only build a strip mall without them. My friend Charles Meeker thought the subsidies weren't a good idea at the time. Kane didn't get the subsidies, but North Hills East still got built. I recently reminded Charles of that at one of our weekly breakfasts. Here's a video of what Mayor Meeker said back then. Please play the video.
Says if this project with public support, John Kane promises that North Hills East
Were you having technical problems?
It appears that way, Michael.
Beth, any idea?
I think somehow it got paused. I'm checking with the team playing it. Looks like it's buffering.
Madam Mayor, is there any way they, because this buffering looks like a bandwidth issue or something, any way they can send this to us and also make sure it's part of the record with the minutes with the clerk?
That's a good idea, City Attorney. Is that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's fine.
So Michael, we'll have them send this to us. I was part of the council at this time, so I'm very aware of the remarks and what the money was actually being requested for a parking deck. So if anybody would like that perspective, I think I provided some of that information this afternoon, but happy to do that as well. So Michael, would you like to continue, and can we take the video down?
Mayor, I have a request.
I can't see anybody because the video is up. So if you have your hand raised, I can't see you. Was that Councilor Cox?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to request that since this is going to be made part of the record, that this video be incorporated with the video of the meeting that's provided online.
Yes, I think that's what Councilor Branch had asked for.
Okay.
Incorporated as part of the record.
Yep, agree.
Is there any time left, or are we pretty much done, Mayor Baldwin?
Like I said, I couldn't see the timer or whatnot. I think they stopped it at 2 minutes, so that's what it appears anyhow. So, Michael, if you'd like to continue.
If I have a few more minutes, or a minute, that's great. What I feel we're doing is kind of deja vu all over again, Groundhog Day, et cetera. We're now hearing from Bonner Gaylord that special things aren't going to happen in this development without public assistance, without public tax subsidies. And Kane made the same reference back then in 2007 regarding North Hills East. And he didn't get them. North Hills East still got developed. And I believe Mr. Kane will do a wonderful development if he meets watershed issues and community benefit issues. I think he'll do something really nice there, hopefully. And I don't believe he needs a taxpayer subsidy in order to accomplish that. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next, we have Reverend Harshaw.
Go ahead, Reverend Harshaw.
Have we lost him?
There, and it took me a second to unmute him.
Oh, okay.
Reverend Harshaw, are you there? Maybe we can circle back, Mayor.
Okay. Reverend Cornelius?
Steering. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm on the steering committee of One Way, a nonpartisan advocacy group comprised of over 40 houses of faith and nonprofits all across Wake County. I'm also the development director of Dorcas Ministries, a 501c3 nonprofit in Cary that provides food, financial assistance, and training to about 25,000 people a year. One of our biggest client expenditures is for rent and utilities. We have an affordable housing crisis in the Triangle. We were very pleased that citizens of Raleigh passed an affordable housing fund last night, but we know that that will only be a drop in the bucket to addressing the problem. One Way feels that any project with the size and scope of the Kane Realty Downtown South development should include affordable housing as one of its central features. Tax dollars will go into the project, possibly, so taxpayers of all incomes should not be ignored. Too often, when projects of this scale are developed, the community around it suffers with skyrocketing taxes and gentrification. We don't want that to happen. We ask the City Council to require that affordable housing be an integral part of this project, and also that the City Council require Kane Realty to participate in a listening campaign that involves not only the residents in the proposed site under consideration, but also other community stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And then we have Michael Brickhouse.
Michael is not on the call. So we can circle back to Reverend Harshaw if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Reverend, are you there? Give me 1 second. He may actually be on via the phone.
I started my day with Reverend Harshaw with a beautiful prayer. So it would be nice to kind of end our session with him too.
I don't have his number in there either, so I'm not quite sure why we can't hear him.
Okay, I will reach out to him.
Okay, if we get him, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay, that would be great, Beth. Thank you. All right, now we are on to matters scheduled for public hearing. The first one is a street closure at Seaboard Avenue.
This is Jason Myers with the Transportation Department. For all 4 of these street closures, I have 1 slide presentations and then some other materials that may help with your questions. The first one, this is, I apologize, I think this the name on this slide is incorrect. It's my mistake. This street closure 7 is for a section of Seaboard Avenue. If Derek can go back to the first slide. That's the one. This is a area in, we are in, and again, I apologize, the title on the slide is incorrect. Seaboard Avenue is in the north of downtown, and the part being closed or being petitioned to be closed is kind of 2 slivers on either side of Seaboard Avenue between Halifax and Seaboard Station Drive in that checked area on the map. This petition is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it is just basically right away above the standard. And I can answer any questions council may have.
I can't, you know what, let's go through all 4 presentations, then we'll take down this and we'll ask questions, okay?
Of course. I'm going to wait for the slide on street closure 8, which is Able Alley. This is nearby, and this is a 30-foot right-of-way known as Able Alley that is north and south between Franklin Street and Seaboard Avenue. This was something that on a 2005 plat map was actually known as North Salisbury Street. This one has a plan inconsistency where it is inconsistent with one of our comp plan policies, T2.7, for preserving the grid, and it is an existing one-way street that would be removed. If council wishes to adopt this one, there are a handful of utility easements that would be needed to be retained as well. And then street closure 9, I will start talking about it while the slide is pulled up, is a dead-end, unbuilt right-of-way off of Corporate Center Drive near I-40 in West Raleigh. This was dedicated as right-of-way. It was never built. This closure would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. This also has 3 utility easements that would need to be retained. And this is opposite Conference Drive. And then street closure 10 is one that council saw in 2018 for a strip of Glenwood Avenue. Council approved that, and the petitioner did not file the plat in time for that resolution to be in effect. Those die after a year, and is back before you to be reapproved so they can apply that plat. This is also consistent with the comp plan. Any questions?
Okay. Let me get my screen back up on gallery view. Does anybody have any questions of Jason? Councilor Branch?
Yes, just one question for the alley one that's being closed, that's inconsistent. Are they closing that because they're looking to redevelop that and they need that street complete to go away because they're going to build in that area?
Yes, sir. If the podium, if Derek can pull up the slide, the next image in my slide is a image from the site plan that's under review. It is not approved at this time. It is not strictly necessary, I don't think, we need the street closure 8, actually. Maybe I should. So this is the site plan, or one of the sheets of the site plan for what is known by the developer as Block B for their development, with the petitioned right-of-way outlined in red. What they are proposing is to construct a private alley on a different alignment near there. And so right now, the transportation comment on the approval of the site plan, though it is not approved for other trades in the review cycle, is that this alley must be closed because of driveway spacing. But they are not replacing it with a public street or a full public street. It's a private alley.
Okay.
Are you intending to show something because there's nothing on the screen?
Oh, I apologize. Can you see it now?
Yes. So can you explain this again?
Yes, I apologize. I didn't realize that you couldn't see this. What you're looking at is one of the sheets of a site plan that's under review by Planning and Development right now. It's ASR 10-2020. It's in review. It is not approved. And the red area that's outlined is roughly the area that's being petitioned to be closed. It is off the site of the site plan, but is immediately adjacent to it. And given driveway spacing, there is a condition that in order to have this plan approved, this street closure must go through. But this is not the only plan that could be proposed here and not the only plan that could theoretically work here. Did that answer council's questions?
Yeah, answer mine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Knight?
Yeah, so I don't know if we've dealt with one of these since I've been here, but I can't tell from the map. Is there any private driveways coming out onto this alley? And
No,
anybody lives
right next door. No, there is nothing that comes out. You remember the old Seaboard restaurant?
Yeah.
It's that street that goes in between there.
Okay.
So they're looking to make an adjustment when they redevelop that area.
Yeah, it's all commercial.
I like to cut through there, though. Okay, no problem.
Okay. No one has signed up to speak on any of these, so I am going to open the public hearing for STC 7-2020. No one has signed up to speak, as I said, so I'm going to close the hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Mayor Pro Tem, and then second by Councilor Stewart. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That was unanimous. Clerk, Street closing STC 8/2020. I'm going to open the hearing. No one has signed up to speak. I'm closing the hearing. We'll have a motion.
Move for approval.
Councilor Branch, seconded by Councilor Stewart. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous, clerk? STC 9/2020.
Excuse me, Mayor, on that one, I think we need to, the motion should include to retain the utility easements. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, that is part of the motion.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. You unmuted. Now she's probably muted again and she won't say anything. Oh no. Okay. All right. SGC 9/2020. I am going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do you have a motion? Councilor Fort.
I move to approve it.
Seconded by Councilor Stewart. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. That was unanimous, clerk. And then STC 10/2020. I'm going to open the hearing. I'm going to close the hearing. Motion.
I move to approve it.
Councilor Ford, seconded by Councilor Melton. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we have a petition annexation. 8712 Silverthorne Drive, District E.
Yes, it's a standard petition annexation. The petitioner is looking to hook up to water and sewer to service a single-family home on a 1 acre piece of land.
Okay.
I can answer any questions you have.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, no one has signed up to speak. I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion to approve? Councilor Knight has made that motion. Do we have a second? Councilor Stewart, thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is an annexation at 3411 Page Road.
Correct. This is a 7.19 acre parcel. It's contiguous it's in Durham County. It's outside the ETJ, but contiguous to our city limits. It's associated with zoning case Z920. The annexation must be approved in order for zoning case Z920 to proceed. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Okay, no one has signed up to speak who is opposed. I have Molly Stewart and Joe Scannell who are available for any questions. Molly, I think you'd be all right if I opened and closed the hearing.
I would. I would just quickly point out that the portion of this site that is outside the ETJ is designated by city policy as something that the city would annex.
Okay. Okay, I am opening the hearing and closing the hearing. Anyone like to make a motion? Councilor Knight, do we have a second? Seconded by Councilor Stewart. All in favor? Opposed? That was unanimous, clerk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Next we have rezoning Z920.
Yes, ma'am. This is Bynum Walter with the Planning and Development. So the first rezoning tonight is a larger area than the annexation that you just approved. This is, I think Derek's going to bring the slides up for me. This is a couple of parcels on Page Road and 2 on World Trade Boulevard. It's a request to rezone almost 15 acres from rural residential, which is a Durham County zoning district, R4 in Raleigh zoning, and IX3 with conditions in our zoning, and IX3 with Parkway frontage, all to a uniform IX3 with conditions. That's industrial mixed use, 3-story height limit, 3-story 50 feet height limit. Consistent with your future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall, the Planning Commission does recommend approval. A quick overview of the site. We're just west of Aviation Parkway here, between Aviation and Page. Number of conditions here, limiting uses, limiting combined retail and restaurant space, increasing your office entitlement, and your retail entitlement is relatively steady, and the industrial square footage increases significantly. So again, consistent with future land use map, consistent with the plan overall, and Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Okay, could we take, okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Bynum? Okay. No one has signed up to speak at this hearing. And once again, we have Molly Stewart available to answer any questions. You've indicated you have no questions. Molly, are you okay if I open and close this hearing?
I am, thank you.
Okay, opening the hearing, closing the hearing. Do you have a motion to approve? Councilor Knight?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4, 2020 contained in the agenda materials and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Seconded by Councilor Melton. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimous, clerk. Next, we have rezoning Z1419. That is 1208 South Blunt Street.
Yes, ma'am. This is an entire block between Bragg and Branch, Person and Blunt. It's just under 4 acres, going from industrial mixed use, 3-story height limit to a PD. The base district for the PD is the neighborhood mixed use district. This is quite an old case. The Central CAC voted in support in November of last year, and the Planning Commission also recommends approval. You can see residential zoning to the north and east of the site, and industrial mixed use to the south and west. Again, a little quick aerial view of the site. You can see the site is almost entirely paved at this point. And the PD identifies 2 tracts here. Tract A would be developed with residential use, and Tract B would be developed with commercial use. The change in entitlement here, the maximum units is actually going down, the maximum retail is going down, maximum office is going down, and industrial is being eliminated. They've made some modifications to the UDO that are called out in this table. I'm happy to speak more detailed about that if you would like, on this table as well. And then some other provisions of the PD are listed here. Again, happy to talk more about these if you're interested in hearing about them. This is consistent with the future land use map, consistent with the South Park area plan, and consistent with the urban form map, and consistent overall with the plan. Again, the Planning Commission recommends approval, and the CAC also did. Happy to answer more questions about this if you would like more detail before you open the hearing.
Does anyone have any questions? Mayor Branch?
It's really not a question, it's more comments. I know this applicant reached out to the CAC and individuals in the community when we were able to meet in person. I feel that, the community has had input on some things that they wanted around making sure that they preserve the heritage and the history of the area. And those things have been implemented as I've seen as conditions. So I definitely appreciate this project and the work that they have done.
Okay. For Z14, we have one person who signed up to speak, Pat Dawson, and one person who is Worth Mills on answer questions. I'm going to open the hearing. Could we hear from Pat Dawson, please?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi. So some of that I just listened to was new to me, but I don't think it necessarily changes what I have to say. Just a little bit. My name is Pat Dawson. I live in the neighborhood. We got one of those letters that kind of says we're within 500 feet of the proposed development. For the last 12 years, I've worked at a place called Neighbor to Neighbor, which is directly across from the property. Address is 1200 South Blunt Street. I attend the Tapestry Church, which resides on that same property, 1200 South Blunt Street. I'm also a member of One Wake, which a couple other people have talked about a little bit. This organizing group of 40 plus institutions that, represent thousands and thousands of Wake County residents. My opposition to this project really kind of stems from the very first public meeting there was about it. I don't know exactly when it was. It had to have been a year or two ago. It was at Chavis Park. And, from my understanding, rezoning to a planned development, it essentially kind of expedites this planning process where, kind of along the way, the public can give more input, which if you go to a planned development, it really just kind of expedites this process, approves plans, and gets the project done in a shorter amount of time. And so my biggest reason for opposing this project is it doesn't feel like, at least for me, that there's been any real public input, at least to my knowledge. Like I know it said like the CAC approved it 16-0. But I've spoken to a lot of people as immediate neighbors, some folks that have lived in the neighborhood for decades, and that were at that first meeting I talked about at Chavis. And upon hearing the project and kind of fielding questions from, I think it was a person from Stanley Martin about building some high-priced condos. He said the price point was going to be in the $400,000 range. And afterwards having these conversations with some neighbors, asking them what they thought about it. And a lot of them just kind of shrugged their shoulders and pretty much said, I don't like it, but what can you do about it? And that really bothered me, just that powerlessness that was conveyed in that moment from many of them of this is a neighborhood that they've invested in and stuck around. And just to see something kind of come in and change the whole, makeup of the neighborhood, and then just to feel like they don't have a real say in what it is. I don't know necessarily, I'm new to this process of, public input on a private development. So I'm not exactly sure what we can propose and impose on them. But, I think for a lot of the existing homeowners in this historically Black neighborhood to feel like their voice isn't being heard and to feel even more marginalized is just not acceptable. So I'm shocked that there's not more people on this call for opposition. I know it's late and the election's been hard on everybody, but I was really encouraged by the affordable housing bond that was passed yesterday. And I know a woman on here kind of spoke about the money and how it can be allocated, but I don't know if any that could be used for this. I'm pretty sure it couldn't, but I think it just demonstrates that, the tide is shifting in Raleigh and people want to see housing development that is equitable, affordable, that is accessible to folks that, aren't reaping the benefits of a community like this that is distressed and is rapidly gentrifying. And so, personally, I do want to see, the site developed. I said over 10 years, I feel like that property holds the keys to the neighborhood. But I think, it's at a point right now that, it could either be used as a force for housing justice and affordability, or it could just be another example of housing violence in our community, and it could completely change the whole makeup of the neighborhood for the future. And I know it doesn't get a lot of the same press that Downtown South does, but I feel like this is kind of a miniature version of that, and I don't think we can mess this up. So I just want to make sure, kind of like the woman said earlier in the public comments, that just want to ensure that the folks in the community that live by it, that their voices are heard, that the input is being taken into consideration. Because in that first meeting, the guy basically said, I'm here because I have to be. I'm required to do this. And it was supposed to be a public input meeting, and he really just kind of laid out plans of what he wanted to do. And it sounds like he was just trying to get this thing railroaded through by going to a planned development. And I just don't think that's okay. And I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dawson. we have Worth Mills, who is representing the applicant. Worth, you have, let's see, Mr. Dawson used about 4 minutes. If you would like to take a couple of minutes.
Sure thing. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Again, this is Worth Mills here on behalf of Stanley Martin. Again, this is a rezoning from IX3 to a planned development. We're proposing a maximum of 100 residential units and 10,000 square feet of non-residential space. There was a presentation that I think should be coming up soon. You go to the third slide there. So here are two photos of the site. Again, one is a close-up aerial and one is of the larger community. Again, you can see that the site is mainly impervious. It's been used as a Carolina Coach maintenance facility for decades prior to it being abandoned. Next slide, please. This again just illustrates the current nature of the property, the lack of sidewalks, the lack of safety around the site. Next slide, please. Again, as I mentioned, this was formerly owned by Greyhound and used as a maintenance facility for their buses. As part of the redevelopment of this site, Stanley Martin and Carolina Coach undertook extensive contamination mitigation and environmental remediation. They removed 24 underground storage tanks. They took 20 feet of contaminated soil out, and they had tanker loads of tainted groundwater that was removed and treated. And Stanley Martin has enrolled this site within the Brownfields program and is working with the state to get their final permits for residential on the site. So this is a site that's been, left out to dry, dilapidated. And Stanley Martin has come in and done a lot of work, to clean this up and make it a more safe environment for everybody in the community. Again, this is an existing zoning. We have some serious breaks in the land use where we have environmental or industrial mixed use next to residential in the South Park neighborhood. This rezoning with a shift to the PD and the NX district is going to create a more stable land use transition from those South Park residents to the more commercial uses to the southeast or the southwest. Next slide, please. And again, the future land use map identifies this as neighborhood mixed use. We are requesting NX as our base district. With the 5-story height limit, only 4 of those stories would be livable space, with the 5th story used as an open air deck for residents. Next slide, please. Here's the urban form map where we have the commuter rail corridor. We have the transit emphasis corridors of Wilmington Street and MLK. And this site is within the core transit area. So that recommends more density, more urban redevelopment. And since this property is not within the NCOD, this is an excellent place to create new development, create new housing opportunities for folks within the downtown area. Next slide, please. This is an aerial of the South Park Small Area Plan. This is one of the handful of sites that's designated as a focal point, and that is supposed to encourage both commercial, office, and residential uses in this little pocket of the South Park Small Area Plan. And this, again, rezoning is going to rehabilitate a contaminated site and help spur that future development. Next slide, please. And just to show you how it's going to play off, so there's 2 site plans just south of us along Branch Street that are both going in for commercial uses. So this rezoning is going to offer that complementary residential use to those adjacent commercial parcels, and it'll help, again, spur that overall focal point redevelopment that we want to see. Next slide, please. We'll go to the next slide. This is a rough layout of the building orientation of the street. You have, again, the buildings oriented along Person and Blunt Street with breaks along Bragg and Branch. Next slide, please. This is part of the open space for the site. In the center of the site where it would run from Bragg to Branch. We have included in the master plan that this remain publicly accessible open space and no barriers be erected to prevent the public from enjoying the space. And so we think that this is going to be an asset for the community at large. Next slide, please. Next slide. Here's a similar development from Stanley Martin. This is titled Riverwalk at Rockets Landing in Richmond, Virginia. You can see a mix of different quality building materials in that modern style. Next slide, please. This is another development from Stanley Martin and one you're probably more familiar with, the Blunt Street Commons across from Krispy Kreme. Again, you see the mix of building materials. You've got stacked units, 2 stories, and then another 2 stories for another unit. We think that this is a product that's worked well in Raleigh.
You have 15 seconds left, Worth.
Thank you. And I'll just say again, we've reached out extensively to the neighbors. We've spoken with Lynette Williams and Shalisa Williams, who are heavily involved with the continue to work with them. We think that this is reasonable and in the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
I received a letter of support from Eric Ellisberg, who owns property at 305 Bragg Street. It has been forwarded to council, but I just wanted to note it for the record.
Okay. So I cannot see the countdown timer when we have so how much time exactly was used?
It indicates 6:43.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think the first person was in opposition and Worth was for it. So I think the times got misconstrued from when it was going. But I think there's probably very few, if any, time left in support of the project. If we don't have any more speakers, I think we can close it and go forward.
Well, I just wanted, in the issue of fairness, if Mr. Dawson had any additional comments. Is Mr. Dawson still with us? Beth?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Did you have any additional comments?
I mean, what he just showed is exactly what he showed us a couple years ago at that Chavis Park meeting. Again, you know, that first meeting was a public input meeting designed to get input from the community. And, you know, I don't know if the gentleman that was speaking now was the one there, but, you know, it made it very clear that I'm here because I'm required to be, and I have to do this. And gave a presentation just like that about what they're going to do versus really kind of engaging what the community wanted to see. So, you know, I'm not really sure what the next step in this process is. You know, I would like to see some more public input. I would like to see more eyeballs on this. When he says that the community's been engaged, I would love to, you know, if somebody could kind of tell me what they've done. You know, in particular, we have not necessarily been engaged in this process. I could probably vouch for about 5 to 6 other neighbors. And, you know, if the answer was that you had to be involved in the CAC to be involved, then, you know, we didn't do that and we missed the opportunity. But I think that's been dissolved, and I think it needs to be reopened for the community to take a look at it again.
Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
No, I mean, I looked at the background information and I saw the neighborhood meeting was March the 28th of 2019. The CAC was August the 7th. And then they voted at November 4th meeting. And the Planning Commission, I see, had this 3 times this year, April, September, and twice in September. So I'm not really, I don't know Mr. Dawson, so I can't really speak to his engagement or information. I do know what information I've received from the CAC, and this is the first opposition I've actually heard of the project. So, but the public hearing is still open. I'm willing to move forward and have more conversation with Mr. Dawson about, you know, overall development in that area.
And what the process looks like, there appears to be a disconnect.
Correct.
Well, if there's no other speakers, I am going to close the hearing. Council Branch?
Yeah, I think Councilor Cox has a question.
Councilor Cox?
Yeah, I was wondering if there's something about artwork associated with this project. And I was wondering what that was about.
I believe it's in one of the conditions. Let me go back. Staff has it.
Is Worth still on the phone, or combine him to this?
That's correct. The Planning Commission actually asked, and this is part of their review, for the applicant to make some provision for cultural reference or cultural history in the materials or representation of the project on the site, and that was offered as part of the revision to the plan development that happened during the Planning Commission's review.
Okay.
Which I believe was the result of public comment during Planning Commission review. I don't think that was initiated by the Planning Commission specifically.
So are there any specifics about that? I mean, are we talking about putting in a brick sidewalk or, or something more elaborate?
Well, they will be required to build sidewalks as part of the city's development regulations.
Well, I meant as public art. I mean, we're talking about, what constitutes, in their mind, public art that is being offered to commemorate the Black community?
Yeah, I believe the specific offer was an interpretive signage. I don't know if Mr. Mills wants to say more about that.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, so this is Worth. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to, not kind of hem ourselves in with the type of art and not limit ourselves to the types of artists that may be commissioned to do something here. We don't have a clear picture yet if it's going to be some type of sculpture, some type of mural, some other form of art. But Stanley Martin is committed to commissioning that art through a local artist and displaying it prominently in the site, most likely within that open space area that would be publicly accessible.
Okay, I think that's important, and so when these cases come before us, I think it's important to highlight some of that. So, it would have been nice to hear this up front.
Understood.
That's also why we have backup material.
All right, so.
Public doesn't.
So thank you. I closed the hearing. Mayor Pro Tem Branch, you've got your hand raised again.
Yes, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendments with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
Council Melton has seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that was unanimous. And I do think the cultural reference is a great opportunity to document some of our African-American history in this city, and I hope more people looking to develop will be part of that. So thank you. Next we have Z3119, Needham, 5228 Needham Road. This is in District C.
This is a request to rezone approximately 30 acres from R4 with a SHOD 1 overlay to R10 with conditions in the same overlay. The request is inconsistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, and Planning Commission recommends denial. You can see here this is on the just inside 540 on the west side of 540, but on the east side of Raleigh. And an aerial view of the site, you can see this is southwest of Buffalo and I-540. They've offered a number of conditions here, limiting uses, prohibiting apartment building type, limiting their density, providing screening to adjacent parcels with some detail, and then also provision for at-grade pedestrian connection to the existing Neuse River Trail, a prohibition of principal structures, parking areas within 800 feet of the shared property line with City of Raleigh property, similar restriction around the 100-year floodplain, and then some limit on impervious coverage. Also, limits on treatment of storm, 1-inch runoff from storm, and then limiting the location of detached house building type. So the change in entitlement here, going from 72 units to right around 117, 118. The setbacks do adjust modestly. The side yard setback is maintained specifically by zoning conditions. Again, inconsistent with the future land use map, which designates this as rural residential, and inconsistent with the plan overall, not just with the future land use map, but with a number of other policies, concerns about density transitions, location of growth. If approved, this would result in a future land use map modification, changing that designation from rural residential to moderate density residential. And again, the Planning Commission recommends denial. What questions can I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Any questions? Okay. We have one person signed up to speak against this. Amanda Boyd. I'm going to open the public hearing. And then we have also Worth Mills back again representing the applicant. So I'm going to start with Mr. Mills.
So, Mayor, did you want me to go first, or would you like?
Yes, please.
Great, thank you. And Bynum, could you please pull up that slide deck for me? So again, Worth Mills here from Longleaf Law Partners. Sitting with me is Jay Colvin from Dan Ryan Builders. Also on the line is Doug Chappell, the property owner. This is case Z3119, a proposal to rezone 29.66 acres from R4 to R10 conditional use to facilitate a residential development with both townhomes and single-family detached homes. With zoning conditions that 1, reduce density to 4 units per acre, 2, offer protections to neighbors in the nearby Neuse River, and 3, provide a connection to the Greenway Trail, we believe this rezoning offers more certainty than its current general use district and is therefore both reasonable and in the public interest. Next slide, please. So here you have an aerial of the site. Again, it is south of Buffalo Road and borders the inside of I-540. In that dark green, you see the Neuse River runs north-south near the western boundary, separated by a small parcel owned by the city. Across the river and connected by the existing Greenway Trail is the Buffalo Road Athletic Park. The site's currently zoned R4, along with a handful of other properties to the south. Next slide, please. Here are 4 zoning conditions relating to environmental protections that the applicant has offered, and a photo showing the flood maps overlay. As you can see, the edge of the 100-year storm just touches the shared boundary of this site and the City of Raleigh property. And so we have offered a condition that states within 800 feet of that shared boundary line, we have prohibited principal structures, streets, and parking areas. So in that red polygon inside the property outline is our theoretical building area, and we will not have any homes within that flagged portion of the lot. Second, within that portion of the property within the 100-year floodplain, it shall remain undisturbed but for utilities, stormwater, greenway trails, fencing, or other required public improvements. And while it's not a large area, I will note that the UDO does allow for 50% development of the site's floodway fringe if certain conditions are met. So we are further, preventing environmental harm through that condition. Next, we have included a maximum impervious surface coverage of 65%. The UDO states that any lots exempt from stormwater control requirements must have an impervious surface cap. The cap for R10 lots is 65%. But this site is required to provide stormwater controls, and in addition to meeting this 65% impervious surface cap. So really, it's just another way for us to mitigate any runoff for the river or for our neighbors. And lastly, the project will treat the first 1.25 inches of runoff as opposed to the UDO standard 1 inch. Next slide, please. So by the time that 75% of the allowable homes are permitted, which is the 89th unit, the project will be making a connection to the existing Neuse River Greenway trail, as shown in the photos below. The city's invested in this area's recreational infrastructure and facilities, both through the Greenway and through Buffalo Road Athletic Park. And this project would bring more folks to use the Buffalo Road Athletic Park with a pedestrian connection to that park. So we're saving on vehicle trips. We're bringing people closer to those investments that the city has made on the greater scale. Next slide, please. These are the 4 conditions that relate to our buffering and our land use transitions. So I'll run through these. We have prohibited the apartment building type. We have reduced density down to 4 units per acre, which is currently allowed in the R4 zoning. To mitigate one of our neighbors' concerns about new residents trespassing onto their farmland, we've included a 20-foot wide buffer along the southern shared property line. That buffer could contain a mix of a berm, a fence, or tree plantings, depending on topography and various site features. We'll figure out which one best suits which parts of the shared boundary line. And lastly, to help ease the land use transition, we've required that all platted lots abutting our north and south neighbors shall be built as single-family detached. And so what that means is we'll end up with townhomes in the site's interior with single-family homes around the edges. This is going to promote housing variety and serve as a land use transition for our neighbors. Next slide, please. Ramey Kemp performed a traffic impact analysis. Sorry, you go back 3 slides, I think, to the trip generation table. So Ramey Kemp completed a traffic impact analysis, although one was not required with this rezoning. And we had them update its analysis based on the reduced density at 4 units per acre. They anticipate that the new rezoning will generate 244 more trips per day than what's allowed under the current zoning. That's 800 under the current, 1,044 for the proposed. But there'll be minimal changes to both the AM and PM hours. We're looking at anywhere from a change of 5 to 15 more weekday peak trips with the proposed zoning versus the current zoning. Next slide, please. Well, you can keep it right there. This slide shows bar graphs with the overall delay wait times at each of the studied intersections. The level of service may vary at each intersection. They're all within a level of E-service, but the difference here is extremely minimal. The difference between current and proposed is never more than a 3-second difference in these anticipated wait times. Next slide, please. And to summarize, the city of Raleigh has invested in this area's public resources, which include the Greenway Trail, the athletic park. One thing that I didn't mention, there was a large sewer line that runs parallel to the Neuse River, which could support residential development today. So all those investments have shown that the city can support this rezoning. This rezoning has limited density to 4 units per acre, which is the existing density, while offering significant protections to both neighbors and the Neuse River.
You have just about 1 minute left. You might want to reserve that.
Absolutely. So with these zoning conditions, providing more certainty, we believe that the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Amanda Boyd. She is speaking opposed to this.
No, she is not joining the meeting.
Okay, do we have any communication from her, clerk?
Not from her, but I have received emails while the meeting's going on from people who did not have an opportunity to sign up but are opposed, and that's Deborah White and Jeff White, Sandra Poole, and Phil King. And they just said they were opposed, did not give any reasons.
Okay. All right, I am going then to close the, let's see, let me ask Worth, you have 1 minute remaining. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Mayor, we have the property owners. They should be on the line and would like to say just a couple of things really quickly.
Okay, 1 minute.
Worth, who do you want me to?
It's Doug Chappell.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay, again, my name is Doug Chappell. Thank you for giving me time to speak in support of the rezoning by Dan Ryan Builders, my brother Wallace Chappell, my sister Brenda Starr, and I own this land. The case is significant in that it opens the door to this northeastern part of the city, which needs reasonably priced housing to impact the needs of this great city. Dan Ryan is currently, as was just described, proposing to build 4 homes per acre. The original plan was 6+. It was objected to by our cousin Sandra Poole, who owns the property adjoining us on the south side, and then a couple on their south side, which was just identified by your clerk, who owns land on the south side of Sandra's property. The objections are tied to concerns with traffic on Buffalo Road. However, the property owner to their south does not, as I understand.
Your time has expired. Thank you.
Would like to tell. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to, Amanda Boyd has not joined the meeting. Beth?
No, Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to close the hearing then. Mayor Pro Tem Branch?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to actually hold this for 2 weeks because I really want to hear from staff about traffic concerns and what we're doing to mitigate the traffic concerns in that area. What is the plan? This is another project in this area. We've had one again, recently. And again, the bottom line of what I'm seeing from our planning commission and reading the background, their denial was because of traffic. So if we can get a better understanding, I've spoken to the applicant. They're fine with this being held because I really want to understand what we're doing to mitigate traffic, the plan. I hear funding, but have we not started a plan yet? Is that the reason, or do we have a plan, just not funding to implement? So I'd like to hold this at the council table for 2 weeks.
So should I leave should I have closed the hearing or leave the hearing open?
You can probably, I will leave it open. It's 2 weeks. I will leave it open. And at the next meeting, if there's some conditions that we need them to put in, it'll be open for that to occur. They give them time. If there are no conditions, we can close it and vote one way or the other.
Okay. City Attorney, cool. Okay. All right. I will leave the hearing open then. We will defer this for 2 weeks. Mayor Pro Tem's request. 2 weeks, right? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have rezoning Z14-2020 Macon Pond Road. No one has signed up to speak against this. We will hear from staff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Walter, Planning and Development. This is a request to rezone 4 1/3 acres from R4 to OX5 with conditions. The Planning Commission recommends approval. This is located on the west side of Edwards Mill and southwest of Durley Road, so pretty much due west of UNC Rex Hospital. And my slides are not advanced. Oh, here we go. Great, thank you. There are a handful of conditions here. They have prohibited some uses. They have limited the office square footage, and they have limited their residential density to no more than 4 units per acre. They've limited the combination of retail restaurant development to no more than 5,000 square feet, and they've provided a transit easement along Edwards Mill Road. They've also limited height to 62 feet west of the height line, limit line. That you can see that drawing in your backup, and it's basically defined as 480 feet from the northwest property corner. It sort of arcs across the property. It's an unusual geometry of the lot. They've specified location of dumpsters and also made some additional planting specifications beyond what would typically be required by code, and they've placed additional limits on lighting. So residential density is not changing, but the office square footage is increasing significantly, and the retail square footage is increasing modestly. Not consistent with medium density residential, so would require a future land use map amendment. Consistent with a handful of policies and consistent with some others. The Planning Commission found it consistent with certain policies and compatible and recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Do we have any questions? Okay, as I said, no one has signed up to speak against this. I am going to open the hearing. I believe we have Isabel Maddox here to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Isabel, no one has signed up to speak. No one has any questions. Are you okay if I close the hearing?
I have the full presentation if you'd like to hear it, but I'm okay if you're ready to go ahead and take this matter up.
Okay, I will then close the hearing. Who would like to make a motion? Councilor Fort?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval was also deemed an amendment to the 2030 comprehensive plan and the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Okay, a second. Councilor Stewart, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Z1920 Fox Road.
This is a request to rezone 2 parcels that are just under 3 acres combined from residential mixed use 3-story height limit with a parkway frontage and conditions to neighborhood mixed use with a 4-story height limit and conditions. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval. So quick aerial of the site, so you can see this on the southeast side of Lewisburg Road and on either side of Fox. They have prohibited a handful of uses, and they have said that if there's not a street protective yard required, they would provide a landscaped area along Lewisburg. The residential density is increasing significantly from about 4 units an acre to almost 30. Maximum number of units there, likely no more than about 84. The office square footage, there's no entitlement there now, so that's increasing significantly. And the retail square footage, again, increasing with limits. The requested rezoning is consistent with the combined future land use map designation. You have a mixed designation here of neighborhood mixed use and office and residential mixed use, and the zoning is requested is consistent with that. The lack of frontage makes this inconsistent with the urban form map, but it is consistent with the plan overall. A number of consistent policies noted here, and then a handful of inconsistent policies, largely that frontage issue popping up there. Again, Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Do we have any questions? Councilor Tots?
Was any reason given for removing the Parkway frontage? Is there a technical reason?
I would refer that question to the applicant.
Okay.
Okay, no one has signed up to speak against this, but I am going to open up the hearing. We have Tony Coleman, Stephen Kenny, and David Leslie available. Would you like to first respond to Councillor Cox's question?
Sure. This is Toby Coleman with Smith Anderson, here for Kenny Properties, the applicant. Thank you, Mayor and Council. In response to, we do have a presentation, and there's a slide that actually really answers this pretty succinctly. Bynum, if you could put that up, that would be great. So the long and short of it, it's the, I think the 6th slide. Long and short of it is that the reason for the, if you go to the next slide, the reason for the request to remove the Parkway frontage is shown by this slide. If the Parkway frontage remains under the current zoning, there would be a required 50-foot landscaped yard along both Fox Road and Lewisburg Road, which would eat up about more than a third of the overall 3-acre property. Along with the 10-foot setback, you end up with a little over half of the property here being developable. Kenny Properties is a long-time developer in Raleigh and actually developed this area originally for the Winslow Park Apartments, which surround it. This is going to be phase 2 of the Winslow Park Apartments. They are workforce housing apartments, at medium rent, and so or median rent, and so. The Parkway frontage essentially eliminates the ability to feasibly develop workforce housing with surface parking. And so the goal here, Councillor Cox, is to provide something that's consistent with the intent of the code, which is to provide a landscape buffer both for the traveling public as well as for the residents, which Kenny Properties wants to do. And so what they've proposed is a 15-foot landscape buffer along Lewisburg Road as a zoning condition. Happy to answer other questions as Councilor has them.
I mean, I guess I have questions both for you and staff, I guess, in particular about because we have Parkway frontage all up and down Lewisburg Road, and I'm concerned about setting a precedent of removing Parkway frontage on Lewisburg Road in particular. Not so much this little segment of Fox Road. I mean, it's not like the other side of Fox Road of Lewisburg, but I am concerned about removing the Parkway frontage along Lewisburg. Are we setting a precedent to removing Parkway frontage up and down Lewisburg Road? And because that's really not what the public is looking for.
Bynum, do you want to speak to that, or would you like me to speak to that?
You go ahead, Toby.
Councillor Cox, what I would say is that, as you know, this is a rezoning, so I don't think this sets a precedent. If you look at the surrounding land uses, actually a number of properties both around it to the south as well as to the north don't have Parkway frontage. It's sort of spotty. This is an area where, and one of the complications here that always be happy to discuss with you is that the way that staff interprets the Parkway frontage is it applies to all primary streets. In this case, both Fox Road and Lewisburg Road are primary streets. And so to avoid the need for a variance or other sort of issues, this rezoning effectively permits the development of this property and this property only with a doesn't impact any of the surrounding properties, which the city during the remapping process did put a Parkway frontage on.
Well, let me get the opinion of the city attorney then on this. If we grant them the ability to eliminate the Parkway frontage on Lewisburg, we're giving them greater entitlement than what other properties on Lewisburg Road would presumably have if they came forward with rezoning. So are we setting a precedent, Madam Attorney, by removing this Parkway frontage
As a legal precedent that would require you to approve the next one, no, every case is looked at individually. So it would depend on a number of different things. So legally, there's no binding precedent.
Okay.
You could certainly argue that you should do it because you did it for someone else, but the council will be entitled to make whatever legislative decision where you have tons of discretion from one case to the next.
Okay, so let me ask this. Can you offer a condition? I mean, 15 feet isn't much landscaping. I mean, can you offer something a little more, like 20 feet?
Councilor Cox, well, I guess we certainly would be willing to look at it. Obviously, if the council feels that's necessary for this to move forward, we certainly, that would, delay the process for 2 weeks. So we would certainly prefer that.
If you're willing to do that, I would appreciate it. And I'm only talking about Lewisburg Road, not on Fox Road.
I have some council members with their hands raised. Councilmember Knight, and I believe Councilmember Melton.
Yes, thank you, Madam.
Councilmember Knight.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This Parkway frontage I think is problematic, this requirement. I think it is similar, if not exactly, to what happened on 4800 Raleigh Road, which is causing us to push the built environment back away from the road. Roads, which is, I think, the opposite of sort of the policies that we want in terms of accessibility, connectivity, pedestrian friendly. It would seem to me we want to get it closer up to the road where we have sidewalks, et cetera, to get people on and off the property. And so, regardless of the outcome of this road, I think that what they're doing is fine in terms of the condition. But I would like to have a follow up. I can do this probably with staff on this Parkway frontage requirement, because I think it is onerous. Not only is it onerous, but it's also going against, I think, the policy that me and I think a lot of us would like to push forward in terms of our urban environment and growth within it. Thank you.
It also, we've had this conversation before. When you push property back, it makes it more difficult to access transit. Councilor Cox?
Well, first of all, this isn't an urban environment. This is a suburban environment. And this is in the comprehensive plan. And this was envisioned to have some greenery between the street and the buildings. And this isn't a location where I think we just want to have concrete. Yeah. We already have a 4-lane highway out there. And I think it would be good to have 20 feet of vegetation, landscaping between the road and the buildings. There's already going to be a sidewalk there, and I think 20 feet is not onerous in terms of reaching going from a building to a sidewalk. And so Parkway frontage, in my opinion, is good, particularly in suburban areas. You might not want it in an urban area, but this is the suburbs. And this is what I'm hearing from my constituents, is that they want to maintain as much greenery as possible along our major roads and not turn 401 into another Capitol Boulevard. That's what I'm hearing. And if the applicant is willing to consider doing that, I think I would like that to happen.
So, Mayor Pro Tem Branch?
Yeah, I don't know if this matters or anything, just for clarification. This property right now where they're looking, the only greenery there is grass. There's nothing there currently but grass.
We actually have a Google Maps in our presentation, if that would be useful for council.
So,
Could we see that?
I believe it's slide 4. So there you see sort of the street view, and we just put a yellow line on it so you knew where it was. But as you can see, yeah, there's a couple magnolia trees at the corner of Fox and Lewisburg on each property, but otherwise there is no. It's a flat, vacant lot, green grass, no trees currently between the roadway and the parcel, and no streams, no other environmental features.
But you can see in the distance the trees, and that's exactly the kind of frontage that we're trying to develop on Lewisburg Road in this area. Now, I'm not asking for that.
Could we raise our hand and be
I'm not asking that we build a
we
forest
raise
here.
our hand and be recognized to speak?
Sure.
Councilor Cox, I hate to remind you, but interrupting people is a violation of the code of conduct.
Well,
please raise your hand and you will be recognized.
I'm raising it.
You are now recognized.
We go back to the picture. We can see the trees in the distance, and we can see that that's the kind of frontage that we're looking for. I'm not asking for that here. I'm just asking for 20 feet of landscaping rather than just a mere 15 feet. And if the applicant's willing to do that, I'd like to give him 2 weeks to do that.
Okay, we have Councilor Buffkin, Councilor Melton.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for Mr. Cox, if I may. Have you spoken to the applicant about this 20-foot buffer before tonight?
I did send him a message telling him that I was not in favor of this because of the elimination of the Parkway requirement. Yes. So he's aware that I had these concerns, and he has indicated that he's willing to consider a 20-foot landscape.
Council Member Melton.
Yeah, this may be, I'm sorry, blanking. This may be too basic of a question. I realize we're approaching the halfway mark of my term, but I still often feel brand new. Why would this have to be held 2 weeks just to change it from 15 feet to 20? I mean, if they're going to agree to it, can it just be added right now? Why would we have to hold it?
Well, I think that they would have to go back and calculate whether that's something they can do. So that's, if it's never been brought up before and hasn't been considered. Hold on 1 second. Can we get an answer to that from the applicant, please?
I would ask, we've got David Lasley of Piedmont Designs, who is the engineer on this project. I believe that we would need to take a look at feasibility. David, I don't know if you've taken a look at 20 feet. This is Toby Coleman again. I apologize. This seems to be there may be a technical snafu here. David, are you on?
I was just going to answer Councilmember Melton's question about process. So there's a regulatory limit here on how cases can be modified during the public hearing process. So you cannot modify the case while the public hearing is open. You'd have to close the hearing in order for the applicant to be able to submit revised conditions, and that would have to come back to you at the next meeting. I appreciate that that delay feels frustrating at times, but it is intended to help you know exactly what you're voting on so that it's clear what's been offered by the applicant, both to you and the public.
Councilor Buffkin, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of Council, I'm mildly concerned about some of what I've heard tonight. My experience as a district councilor is you got to do a lot of homework outside of meetings to be prepared for these cases. And I don't think the homework has been done here. And we've got a good proposal in front of us. We have a special circumstance with 2 primary streets requiring buffer on both streets. And I think we've got a reasonable proposal in front of us to achieve most of the policy goals of our planning documents. Mayor, I'm ready to move approval of the consistency statement at the appropriate time.
Okay, the public hearing is still open. There's no one signed up to speak against this, so I am going to close the hearing. Let's see. I guess if Councilor Buffkin wants to make a motion, we'll see where we are.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Buckin, if I may, were we able to get the engineer? I think he had the engineer. Was the engineer available? Do we know Beth, his engineer?
Yeah, if that was David, then I can unmute him.
Yes,
David.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Baldwin and members of the council. Yes, so one of the things that's very unique to this particular site, this is a remnant piece of land that was developed with the original apartments. And these type of UDO regulations and frontages were never envisioned when these remnants were left. And here we are following up a couple decades, 3 decades, I guess, later, and looking to see how these parcels can be developed. And the developer and owner of the adjacent apartment project wants to continue building out more apartments there. And we're really restricted with the physical width of property that we have between Lewisburg Road and the rear property line. And in order to put a building in there and get parking, we've got to reduce that front landscaping yard. And we're proposing to increase the amount of planting in it, but we're just restricted on width. It's either that or it's undevelopable. And so that's kind of where we are, and that's the reason for the request. And understand too, even if we have a 15-foot yard in there, we'll still have a 5-foot setback. So in essence, there is 20 feet in there. It's just a 15-foot yard with a 5-foot setback. So we would appreciate your support of the request. Thank you.
Councilmember Cox?
He mentioned something about suggesting an enhanced landscaping. I was wondering if you could describe that.
Councilor Cox.
Normally this would be a C2 type yard, which would only require four shade trees and 15 shrubs per 100 feet. One of the things we were looking at providing was 6 trees and 20 shrubs per 100 feet. And try to get a little more planting in there and not being unrealistic with what could actually fit in the space that's being provided. Listen, these are apartments. We want vegetation in there.
Okay, I was trying to find this in the conditions.
Councilor Cox, it is in condition 2. It's part of the 15-foot width. I believe that the condition ultimately, at a suggestion of staff, we ultimately went back to a C2 yard planting, which is 4 shade trees and 15 shrubs per 100 lineal feet. The reason was we as David outlined, we proposed something more than that. To plant more. Concern from staff, I believe, is that plants might not take, and so rather than risking dead plants, we went for a slightly more spaced out to give those plants room to grow.
Okay, Councilor Buffkin, you had wanted to make a motion, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Councilmember Knight has seconded that. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That passes 7-1. Clerk, with Councilor Cox in opposition. Okay. And thank you for building affordable housing. We need it. Okay, this is Z24, Buffalo Road on the north side, 1 mile west of I-40.
This is a request to rezone just over 10 acres from R4 and Manufactured Housing District to R10 with conditions. The Planning Commission recommends approval by a split vote. Votes against had concerns with growing traffic volume on Buffalo Road, and the Planning Commission delivered an additional recommendation for the council to consider prioritization of already planned Buffalo Road improvements. You can see the site here on the west side of Buffalo Road. Fair amount of residential surrounding this undeveloped site. Conditions here limit principal uses to single-unit living, two-unit living, and multi-unit living, and prohibit the apartment building type. The residential density is a little bit more than doubling, and the maximum number of units is also a little bit more than doubling. And the setbacks are generally decreasing with the change in district. So this is consistent with the moderate density residential designation on the future land use map, a number of consistent policies identified, handful of inconsistent policies identified. Again, the Planning Commission split vote recommends approval with concerns about traffic in the area. And I do have Jason Myers from the Office of Transportation Planning here tonight to answer questions if you would like to hear from him, or if you have questions for me before you open the hearing.
Councilmember Cox?
Yes, I just want to note that this is just down the road from Needham Road, Z3119, that we have paused for 2 weeks in order to get an analysis back on traffic in the area. And I would be interested in hearing that analysis before moving forward on this case, because they're both in the exact same area.
Okay, well, we do have a public hearing scheduled, so let's move forward with the public hearing. We do two people have signed up to speak against this. Bynum, could you run through your presentation, please?
I already gave my presentation for this case. I'd be happy to revisit anything you'd like me to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's been a really long day.
It has. It was a long night and a long day. Yeah.
Long week ahead.
Yes. So anyhow, we have 2 people signed up to speak against this, so I am going to open the public hearing. We have Jamie Schwegler from speaking on behalf of the applicant. We'll start there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm Jamie Schrader with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a rather straightforward request, and I'll try to limit my time to leave at least a minute or two for any questions that we have at the end. And our engineers are also on the line to answer those questions. Bynum, if you could bring our presentation up, I'll go through that very quickly, that I hope illustrates some of the questions you might have tonight. This request is to take the property from R4 to R10 CU to enable a townhome development. And as Bynum noted, this area is just about half a mile west of the Neuse River, as well as the earlier case you saw tonight, the Z3119. But it's distinguishable in several key ways. Next slide, please. As Bynum noted, one of the areas that's distinguishable is that we are consistent with the future land use map, and the staff found consistency with the overall comp plan policies, because the density that we're seeking here is 10 units per acre, which is consistent with that future land use map designation. It's an infill site surrounded by other residential area development in the area. Next slide, please. These are several of the consistent policies, which mainly focus on providing housing in an infill site and appropriate density aligned with other existing residential patterns. Next slide, please. We designed the conditions that you'll see in your packet mainly to respond to questions from the neighbors that concerned apartment use. So we limited and prevented that use and that building type from being apart and focused really on the townhome use and single unit and multi-unit living. There were also concerns over traffic on Buffalo Road. And what we did there, as you'll see in the next slide, is illustrated what we'd be required to do at site plan, which is significantly different from the other proposal you saw before you tonight. Next slide, please. The Raleigh Street Plan designates this portion of Buffalo Road as an avenue 4-lane divided with an ultimate right-of-way of 104 feet. The Planning Commission discussed traffic concerns in the overall area, given this improvement is not currently on the STIP or the city's plans for expansion. That means without this project, improvements along this portion of Buffalo Road would not be made until prioritization, funding, and design are committed, the earliest date for construction of which would be 2025. Next slide, please. However, in the meantime, if approved and going forward to site plan, we examine what we would be obligated to do under the UDO to demonstrably improve the area and provide public benefits. And that includes widening to that full lane, which would be an additional 50 feet of right-of-way dedicated, and improving along 1,000 feet of frontage on the west side of Buffalo Road. This includes what's shown on your screen in dark gray, and then a little bit larger on the screen to the right, where you see the full future 4-lane section that would be paved out and striped so that when the expansion occurs, the city would just come in and be able to restripe instead of having to build out. It would also include curb and gutter, relocation of utilities like fire hydrants and light poles, and allows us to install left turn lanes and such. It's significant because the cost of these improvements is roughly $700,000. We're only having about 100 units on the site, so it's significant in proportion to the traffic that we would propose on the site. Next slide, please. This illustrates what Ramey Kemp was able to do. This site did not require a TIA, but it looked at the proportion of our trips to be generated in comparison to the overall average daily trips. And what's significant about that is that the net impact of our zoning would really only be 357 average daily trips, which is about half of what you saw on the Z3119 projected traffic. When we compare that to the future ADT of Buffalo Road, the increase is only 2.2% over what is allowed by right on the site today. Next slide, please. And that 2.2 is extremely low, not only in compared to the amount of improvements we would be doing to widen the 1,000 foot of frontage, but also when you look at how much of the road we'd be improving from Buffalo, from the Neuse River crossing down to Buffalo Athletic Park. Essentially, we'd be making 20% of that total improvement that is required along there. Essentially, 20% of what would otherwise become a city project and developed with city funds, we would be doing at site plan. And when we look at what proportionality requires, we're really doing more than our fair share when you look at the number of units that we're developing on the site. We're still doing it in a way that provides housing in a reasonable manner in an infill site. If you look at the chart below, it's actually more frontage per unit than any of the other subdivisions that have already been approved along that area. So without this development, again, the city would otherwise be using public funds to do that. And I think that distinguishes this case in that while the city gets the funding for the design for the rest of the build out, we can be providing the full section and the right of way, the curb and gutter, and been providing a situation where the city can just come in and restripe instead of having to wait for any improvement to traffic whatsoever until the full funding is there. So kind of an interim step while that prioritization takes place. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there were some questions raised about stormwater from the public, and I think it's probably better for me to wait to hear those questions and have our engineers address those. I'm happy to answer those now from council.
Yeah, let's wait, Jamie, till we hear from public on this, okay?
Thank you.
We could hold it, I think it was 2 minutes and like 20 seconds. If we could reset, just remember that if we reset the timer, and if we could go to 8 minutes. I have 2 people who are speaking, signed up to speak, who are opposed. Lori Herod. Beth, do we have Lori Herod on the phone or Mark Stewart?
We have Lori and Mark Stewart.
Okay, we'll start with Lori, please.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to speak in opposition to this development. My mother, who is elderly, she's 87 years old, owns the property right around the curve from this property that's up for rezoning. The water from that property would flow to my parents' property and go down the side of their yard into a ditch. I sent lots of, not lots, but several pictures as attachments. They're showing now on the screen. That's my 90-year-old daddy who passed away last year. And he spent the last years of his life, every time it rained, out in the yard. He has a rake in his hand, where he'd have to go out after it rained and get the trash. That just shows some of the trash like this in the very back of the ditch to show you how far the trash goes. He'd also have to take a hoe. That's their shed. That is, you can see the water erosion under the shed on the boards of the shed that is going to end up tipping over into the ditch. Now, the city allowed a development, Stone Ridge subdivision, to be built across the street from my parents' home, years ago. And they didn't do anything with the water at that time from that development. So all that water flows onto my parents' property. The slide you're seeing now is stagnant water from a rain that was 1 week before this picture was taken. It's a health problem. Dale Hyatt from the Stormwater Division with the city was nice enough to come out last Wednesday and look at it with me again. This is a picture from inside the house looking out a window. This is my parents' yard, and this did not happen until a subdivision was built across the street from their house. And they have been living with this. I sent an attached letter that was sent to the city of Raleigh in 2012. And so this is how long this has been going on. And at that time, they did nothing about it. And just this new development has just brought it all up again. And the fact that my dad just passed away in the past year, we're all very emotional about it anyway. But we're just strongly opposed to the city allowing more development where that water is going to end up on my parents' property. My mother sits at the window every time it starts raining until it stops to see if the water is going to come up into her home and she's going to have to evacuate. She's had 3 strokes. She can barely walk. So she couldn't evacuate if the water started coming into the house. And so we're just very strongly opposed to the city approving any more building in this area. Now, Luke, the engineer, went out and he looked at the property yesterday and this morning. And he sent me a letter saying that they would only release their water after the subdivision across the street's water had been released. And I wanted to say exactly what he said, after the water from the Stone Ridge subdivision has gone down. Well, the problem is the water doesn't go down from the Stone Ridge subdivision. My parents live with that standing water in their yard every day of their life. And if this is approved, then at some point he's going to have to release his water, and it has nowhere to go but my parents' yard. And it is just an injustice that's been done to my family by the city of Raleigh and by the Stone Ridge subdivision. And I'm just upset. And I don't know any other way to say it. My mother spent the night with me tonight so she could talk, but she got so tired at 8:30. She said, "I've got to go to bed." And so she's in the bed. She wanted to say something, but it's just unfair. And my mom is poor. She doesn't have the money to fix her yard. And all these big developments, this Jamie, which she sounds really nice, I think it's great that she's going to provide for the city and save you money on this 4-lane divided road. But nobody can fix this problem for my elderly parents who have no money, who get no income, except for Social Security. I cannot see this moving forward.
Lori, I'm going to ask if, and first off, I'm sorry for the loss of your dad.
Thank you.
And the issues, I would like to ask Mark Stewart if he could speak, and then we will get back because we're running out of time. So if you would stay on the line, and we will ask Mark Stewart to come on.
Thank you very much. I'm a resident in River Landing subdivision. I've been there since early 2004, so I've been here in Raleigh for some time. Our subdivision is directly opposite the property that's being proposed here for the rezoning. I sent some information by email earlier today, and I just want to hit some highlights from that. My main concern here has been safety. Buffalo Road is an old 2-lane road. It's really not adequate for current traffic, and there's been numerous accidents there at this specific location. Just a couple of examples. In 2018, there was a school bus accident that was covered by local news. Just within the past few weeks, a vehicle crossed the yellow line and crashed into a tree and fence on the opposite side of the road. Those are just a couple examples, and I can say personally, I've experienced several close calls and felt at risk traveling in this section of Buffalo Road. So, right now, this part of Buffalo Road is a safety hazard. There's other new developments. I was not aware of the details of the earlier discussion there on the Buffalo Road plot that was mentioned, but I find it interesting that, that case was not approved by the Planning Commission for rezoning because of traffic conditions, and here we are just down the road and the same thing is being asked, but it's being recommended for approval by at least a portion of the Planning Commission. I find that difficult to understand. I was not aware of any plan to make any improvements, and I had read the report, the zoning commission report. I apologize, I was not aware of the proposals that the developer was made, so it was a bit hard to see those details, and I guess I would be interested to see more of those details, but as of what I knew before coming on here tonight, I wasn't aware of any plan to make any improvements to that road. So because of the real present risk, I could not support and want to oppose the rezoning because any improvements are going to make it worse. But multiplying that from an R4 to an R10, of course, is going to make it that much worse. I also did want to highlight congestion. I personally have seen many times cars backed up from past Interstate 540 to the entrance of the athletic park there. So you're talking about a 1.5 mile portion of cars backed up, and not just on occasion. I mean, routinely in the evenings, taking more than 15 minutes to drive that distance. We've got a fire station right there, Fire Station 27, right by the park, and I mean that is going to prevent proper response from the station in an emergency. So,
Mark, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a question for Jamie. How do you plan to address stormwater issues here?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We received Ms. Hare's letter that I believe she shared with the city, and those photos, and kind of traded some information with each other, and reached out to Wayne Miles with the city to understand what the history was behind this area and how it came to be. And one of the issues, I think, let me explain kind of what we learned and then how we plan to address it, if you would. We learned that the Stone Ridge subdivision was approved before the modern UDO rules, which require a BMP or stormwater pond. And so they had a sediment control basin during construction, but when that construction completed several years back, they filled in the pond and weren't required to have a BMP, and that's apparently when some of this flooding became more rampant. And so we worked with Wayne to say, what could be done here, and learned that because there was documented structural flooding downstream, the UDO would require us not to design to a 2 or 10-year storm, which is the standard, but actually to a 100-year storm. So up to 10 times what the UDO would otherwise require for other developments. And what that would do for Ms. Hare's property is that instead of during these peak storm events, all of the stormwater rushing down from our property in Stone Ridge at once, it would retain the stormwater on our site and then slowly release it over time after that water has had time to infiltrate. Obviously, 100 years a storm is much higher than you typically see, but that's what the code requires. And that's also why you don't see that as a condition or the expansion as a condition. That's what we're going to be required to do under the code. So that is our plan.
Okay, do you have any additional steps that you would take?
We went out and observed the site. I think we'll continue to monitor that, and as we go through site plan, work with the staff to determine if there's other measures. We discussed whether the HOA could install things on their portion to kind of slow the flow, or whether there were other things that they could do. And we have not been able to reach the HOA for a discussion on that point, but we'll continue to do that and work with staff as we go forward.
Okay. Jamie, you're also aware that we are holding for 2 weeks another rezoning case near here. Would there be any hardship if we delayed this for 2 weeks so we can hear all the information at one time relating to traffic?
If the council would prefer us to be held for 2 weeks, we're happy to oblige. I just would hope that we would see these cases for the differences that they have in terms of frontage on Buffalo Road and consistencies. But we're of course willing to be held for additional information.
Okay. All right. Councilor Stewart.
If we do end up holding this for 2 weeks, I wonder if we could get just a report, maybe in the manager's update from Stormwater about this case. I know that there's been a lot of work done and some information out there, and I think it'd be helpful for all council to have the same information about what Stormwater has found.
Okay. Councilmember Cox?
Yes, regarding the Harris property, and that this has been a long-standing problem, I would be interested in hearing in that report what can be done to mitigate their situation. I know that that building to a 100-year storm will help, but it's not a perfect solution. There's still all this stormwater coming from the other subdivision. So I'd like to hear from staff, what are the options to mitigate that?
Okay, so when staff gives that report to us, we'll include that. The hearing is still open. I'm going to keep the hearing open, and if everybody's okay with it, we deferred for 2 weeks. Councilor Branch's request, we'll defer this for 2 weeks and get a report on traffic and plans for Buffalo Road. Is everybody good with that? We need a motion to defer?
No, I think you stated that we're holding it, so I think we're fine.
City Attorney, we're good? Okay. All right. Thank you, Jamie and Lori and Mark.
Thank you.
All right, the next is Z3020, 5329 Departure Drive.
I believe this is the last rezoning item of the night. This is a request to rezone just over 8 acres from industrial mixed-use 3-story height limit with a parking limited frontage to residential mixed-use 5-story height limit. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval. You can see this is on the west side of Departure. We're south of Spring Forest and north of Atlantic Avenue. The change in entitlement here roughly doubles the residential units per acre, the density allowed, and the maximum units goes up to 176 units. Either office entitlement and retail entitlement both reducing here significantly, and the industrial square footage also just no longer permitted under the new zoning. This is consistent with the community mixed use designation on the future land use map, consistent with the plan overall. And again, Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Any questions? Okay. There's no one here signed up to speak. I'm going to open the hearing. We have Travis Venzel. Travis, I think you saw that there were no questions from the council members.
That is correct, and I don't have much to add. I'm happy to answer any questions if they come up, but staff did a very good job, and we would just ask for the council's support in our rezone request.
Okay. Do we have any questions of Travis? Okay. That being the case, I'm going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Councilor Cox?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Okay, do we have a second? There were about 4 hands up at once. Councilor Buffkin, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously, clerk. Next, we have text change TC 1120 tenant notification.
Good evening, Mark Holland with Community Development Planning. This is text change 11-20 for tenant notification. This text change would expand the city's mailing notice requirements to include tenants and renters. The mailed notice would be provided to all the property owners and to tenants within a specified radius of the subject property, as well as those within the property itself. It would also require a posted notice for multi-tenant properties. Any signage associated with this would have to be posted within the adjacent right-of-way, and this text change will also include standards for the construction and content of signs. This text change was recommended by the Planning Commission by a unanimous vote. Staff is available for any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions from council? Councilmember Melton?
Do we need to do the public hearing first before I ask questions? I'm not going to make the motion. I do have questions for staff.
Okay, if you have questions, ask them now.
Yeah, I just saw that in the agenda material. It says that Planning Commission recommends that we add clarifying language regarding commercial versus residential and language to address ESL. Council member Stewart and I are doing a listening session on renter-related topics. Are these suggestions that we could discuss in our listening session and come back later, or is it easier if we were going to make these tweaks to do it before we enact this text change?
Unless there's some sort of legal requirement here, I I would think that if there's going to be changes that are going to be made in that listening session that would need to be incorporated into this language, then this item would have to be deferred until such time as that language can be added, unless there is some sort of legal requirement there. Maybe the city attorney can weigh in.
Well, you can pass this one and then you can come back and add more later. And there may be other things that come out of your listening session that you want to add. So we've been trying to push this through. So technically you could pass this today and then come back from your listening session and say, can you add these additional things? Otherwise you could hold it. Potentially, I suppose you could make a suggestion to add additional language. There's really no reason you can't do that, although you may want to, I don't know that there may be a question who knew about it before, but that's up to y'all too, if you want to add it now or just wait and amend it later.
Yeah, that was the only question I had, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, no one has signed up to speak against this. I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Council Melton?
Yeah, I'm about to read the motion to approve. I'm just going to add that I think I said this earlier, this is a great first step in including more of our community members in our city processes. And I thank Councilmember Stewart really for flagging this issue to attention last year and for working with me on bringing it forward this year. We are doing a listening session on November 19th, and it's likely that we will be coming back to council with some more ideas to explore and maybe recommending additional changes. But I feel comfortable moving forward with this now to take this first step, understanding we have more work to do. So I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Seconded by Councilor Stewart. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. And then we have text change TC 1220 historic subdivisions.
Okay, this is text change 12-20 for historic subdivisions. This text change would move approval authority for subdivisions that are located within the historic overlay district and with an historic landmark from the city council, and will give that authority to the Historic Development Commission. This text change will also clarify that subdivisions in these areas are only to be denied when they are not in harmony with the character of the district or with the landmark. It would also align the UDO with changes made to state law, noting that appeals from the Historic Development Commission decision would be made directly to the Wake County Superior Court. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this text change by a unanimous vote. Staff is available for any questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, no one has signed up to speak against this. I am going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Stewart.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Okay. Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Branch. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously. So that is the last item on our agenda for this evening. Had a long day, and I think it's about to become a little longer. So I want to thank everybody for being here, all the hard work that went into today. Also, our announcement regarding our new city manager, Marshall Adams David, obviously a highlight of the day. Nothing against you, Ruffin. All good. So anyhow, thank you, everyone, and we will adjourn the meeting.